Hi ladies and gentlemen, Adam Steele from Hot Pulse Studios here, and today I've got something really exciting. This is, as far as I'm aware, the first review of the new Audient EVO4 interface. Let's check it out. So what is the EVO4? It's from Audient and it's a portable little interface and it's got a few interesting new features. Audient were originally known for their big mixing desks and now they've got the ID range, the ID 14, 22, 44, all that kind of stuff. And now they're making a whole new line and that's the EVOs. It looks very different from the ID series. It's got a much flatter kind of setup, instead of knobs and dials, which is something that as an engineer I would be quite comfortable with. It's got much more of a modern layout, as it were. It's got a few very kind of recessed buttons, and then one big knob in the middle. And so there are two. There's the EVO4, which is the one I have in front of me, and the EVO8, which as yet has not been released, but that should be out very soon. So the EVO4 has two combination mic and line inputs. Both can provide phantom power separately from each other, which is always nice on a portable interface. I mean, personally, I've never found a problem with phantom power, with ribbon mics being damaged and that kind of thing, but it's nice to know that the choice is there, because that also means then that any fears you might have can be quite thoroughly put to rest. Now the next question, I suppose, and this is one of the most important things, is how does it sound? Well, this is a good test because the microphone above me right now is actually plugged straight in to the EVO4. I'm using a Sennheiser MKH416 shotgun microphone, and that's going into my laptop here using Reaper, using the EVO as an interface. It's plugged in using Audient's own ACO drivers, the Windows drivers, and I've got it set to 256 sample latency, which is giving me about a 10 millisecond round trip, which isn't too bad considering that this is a portable interface. USB doesn't tend to get that much better. If you get lower and lower latencies, you do start to run into problems with USB interfaces, but that's the same pretty much across the board. That's something that is a problem with USB itself and not with the interface. But as it stands, I can get down to, say, 128 sample latency, which is quick enough that it's not going to cause an issue for most musicians. If you can hear a little bit of noise in the background, what you should be able to hear is actually the fan noise from the laptop, because as far as I can tell, these things are very, very low noise. This mic needs quite a lot of gain, and even so, there doesn't seem to be any appreciable self noise. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab, usually I do what I call the SM7 test, which is to get a Shure SM7B, which is a notoriously quiet mic that needs a lot of gain, and absolutely crank the interface. But my SM7, unfortunately, is out for repair. So what I've got is an SM57, but this has been modified to the transformer has been removed, which means it's a much more quiet microphone, which means it's very similar to the SM7B. So I'm going to get this plugged in now, and in a couple of seconds we'll show you how it sounds with the gain absolutely hammered. 1 2 1 2 1 2. This is the SM57 with you can actually hear my breath because there's no pop shield on this, but that's where an SM57 has an inbuilt pop. But if you listen very, very, very closely, you can hear the tiniest bit of background noise. But I would have said that most of that background noise is actually this laptop that's, 18 inches away from the microphone, and that's with the gain on the EVO4 absolutely cranked. So that's quite impressive. The fact that the self noise is far lower than me going means that this is quite usable even at maximum gain range. a lot of more affordable interfaces, you do find that when the gain is absolutely at the top, you suddenly don't get what we call clean gain because a lot of background comes in. And this is definitely not the case here. That's quite impressive. Alright, let's move on. Yeah, so I've got the headphones on just to see how the shotgun mic sounds, and a lot of what I can hear is actually what sounds like a small hairdryer in the background is the laptop, and is not, as you might imagine, any kind of other noise. Take that off. So, next question is, how does it sound in a proper recording context? So, I'm getting a little fed up of doing recordings of myself. So I got a friend of mine in, a guy called Danny Quinn. And Danny, for the purposes of this video, recorded for me a song using my iPad and the Evo 4, which is a whole conversation we'll talk about in a second. But this is an excerpt from one of Danny's own songs called Messed Up Bad. This has got a small diaphragm condenser on the acoustic and a large diaphragm condenser on the vocal, both powered 48 volts, both powered off the Evo 4 recording to the iPad, and then mixed a little bit later on the main machine. Here's that.
I messed up bad, all because I got messed up bad. Always trying to be Jack the lad will only make you get messed up bad. Waking up extremely late from the night before, with all your mates falling through the door at almost 8. It's the things you love you start to hate. You can't think straight cause your head is banging. What's on your mind is how you're hanging, and I'll never drink again is what you'll say, but then you're right back on it the very next day and messed up bad.
So, as I said, that was recorded onto an iPad, which answers the question, can you use this interface with an iPad or even an iPhone? The answer is yes, but there is a little bit of a caveat. It is tricky, and that's not because of anything other than the fact that the Evo 4 needs quite a bit of power. It doesn't have an external DC input, which is something that, being honest, I would have liked to have seen external DC input, but I am quite aware that at this price point that would then add extra cost for what is quite a niche use case. I am told by Audient that you can get full phantom power off both of these channels if you plug the Evo 4 hopefully into a USB 2 socket, but definitely if you plug into a USB 3 socket. Now, just to cover that ground, is this a USB 3 interface? No, it isn't. I find that generally speaking, USB 3 doesn't help for audio because the way it works, you get bigger chunks of data, but you don't actually get any lower latency or anything like that. What you can get off USB 3 is that the way that USB 3 was designed, it can provide more power. The old USB 2 sockets, if they're working right, can provide 500 milliamps. USB 3 can provide 900 milliamps, which is nearly twice as much, and is enough to properly power 2 or even 4 48 volt phantom microphone inputs, which is the case on the upcoming Evo 8. So they've designed it that way to be able to take that much power. And so using it with an iPad, iPads themselves can't give nearly enough power off their own power source. So what I had to do is I did things this way round. So I started with the iPad, and I've got this thing that they called it iPad camera connection kit, which is a little dongle. And I've got two. I've got kind of a thin one and a thick one, the USB 2 and USB 3. The USB 3 one also has a lightning port on it, so you can charge the iPad at the same time. If I try and plug that straight in with the Evo, it won't work at all. And you can see in this little clip here that the Evo just keeps cycling through power and won't start up. So what I did is I got a battery bank. Specifically, I used one by Anker, but you can use anything really. Or you can actually use a wall charger, a USB charger, instead of a power bank. Either works. but with a power bank, it's portable, so that's why I would do that. So I tried plugging that straight in using a Y cable, and this Y cable meant that the data from the Evo would go from the Evo to the iPad, and the power would come from the power bank. You can get those. I'll leave a link in the description to one of those. And that still wasn't working, which is quite finicky. I've used it with an ID4 before, and that's worked perfectly fine. I've done it with other interfaces, it's worked. So what I had to do, using the USB 3 camera connection kit, is plug another iPad lightning cable into the power bank and into that. And that way, because the iPad was getting power, I think at that point the iPad was stopping trying to supply any power to the Evo and just kind of giving up and accepting the fact that, okay, fine, whatever. And then the power bank was powering the Evo and it was doing its own thing. Which means that the videos that I did with Danny Quinn were all using the iPad, but using a power bank to power both the EVO4 and charge the iPad at the same time. Which actually means that I could do this anywhere. It's a bit of a complicated little setup, but it does mean that I could record in the middle of nowhere with no actual wall power at all, with an interface that does need quite a bit more power than something like an iPad could provide. We can see here that it works perfectly well with a Windows laptop. Audient make Mac drivers as well. I would imagine that works exactly the same way. And the Evo, when I first plugged it in, wanted a firmware update, but that was as simple as clicking a couple of buttons. One more thing that I want to try is that all the buttons here are really quite intuitive. One of them is a big green button, and that is Smart Gain. Now, the Smart Gain's pretty cool, I think. The Smart Gain, if you're an engineer, generally you can decide how much gain you want out of a channel. You press the button for that channel, channel 1 or channel 2, then that comes up as the LEDs light up to how much gain there is. If I then turn the knob, I get more or less gain. I'll just say that again, you get more or less gain. And yes, that's to do with what you decide. But if you want the Smart Gain feature to decide for you how much gain you need before clipping, then you press the green button once you've selected your channel for Smart Gain. That's now lit up. 1 and 2 are now blinking. If I hit number 1 for this, then hit Smart. Okay, so what I did there, it went quiet on the actual recording. You're not supposed to do this two at the same time. Is I engaged Smart Gain, chose channel 1, pressed the green button again, and as the lights were flashing in a very pretty manner, I made lots of noise and then hit the green button again, and it worked out a gain setting for me, which isn't unreasonable. I'm going to have to boost that in post because it's a little bit less than I've been recording with, so I'm going to go with... Okay, there we go. So I'm back to the gain level I was at before. But yeah, that means I could get a guitar, plug that in, and Smart Gain really hammer that, and that would give me an appropriate gain level. I could have 2 mics and it would set the gain levels for me as well. The Smart Gain feature is pretty cool, that it detects over an amount of time, depending on how much level you give it, and that's rather nice. There's also a button with a couple of faders on it, which shows you how loud or quiet the output should be from whatever it is that you're using. And then the bottom right one is the overall volume, which I've got headphones plugged in here, and that gives me a reasonable headphone volume. And the headphone volume can get quite loud, which is definitely good to know. One more test that I've got before we finish is I'm now going to plug a guitar in and use a really high gain amp sim. Something from Helix Native is a program that I've started using again with one of my own impulse responses in the cab, of course. And I'm going to try that and see how that goes. And I'm going to stop playing without a noise gate. I'm going to make sure that the noise gate is off and see how much noise we get in between, because that's quite important to me. If I can get a really clean DI signal with a high gain amp with very little noise in the background, that means that I then arguably don't need a separate DI. I've always preached that you should have a separate DI, but sometimes that's not necessarily the case if your interface is of a high enough quality. Let's see if it is. Not too bad, considering that amp model was really quite high gain. That was like a Bogner Uberschall with a gain relatively high. When I stopped playing with no noise gate then, there was a tiny bit of background noise, but a lot less than I was expecting, and the background noise was probably electromagnetic interference from the many computers and things that are around me. And it was the kind of noise that wasn't intrusive. I've used interfaces before where there's a lot of like a snowstorm of noise that makes recording practically unusable, and that certainly wasn't it. So yeah, really decent for recording guitars on the go, really decent for the kind of interface cost that it is. It's quite a nice little form factor as well. It's a tiny little cube. I'm really liking how when I select a channel I can see the meters. And generally this is just a nice tidy little unit without too many controls to scare people off. So the last thing that is worth looking at is the price. So I've just done a little research and these are going to be on sale. The EVO 4 for £99, so what, $120, something like that? And the EVO 8 is going to be on sale for £159, so what, just under $200 for a 4-channel, full phantom-powered interface with all that good stuff. And that is a real nail in the coffin for a lot of interface manufacturers at the bottom level. If they can produce something of this quality at that price point, that's that easy to use as well. If you get a decent microphone and a good enough sounding room to record in, there should literally be nothing stopping you now from making great recordings. And that's going to be a very exciting future. One thing that I'm probably going to do is in our description of all of the videos that we make, we have a little list of gear, including best small interface, best medium interface. The small interface, as soon as the EVO 4 is available for purchase, which isn't going to be very long at all, then I'm going to be changing that link from the ID4 to the EVO 4, because for me, for someone who needs something to start recording with, I really wish I had something like this when I started. I had a 4-track cassette recorder and that was awful. And this thing is absolutely amazing. So really looking forward to seeing these out in the wild. Thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this and found this really useful. And stick around because there's loads of gear reviews coming. Also loads of tutorials on things like Reaper and Pro Tools and mixing and generally how to get better sounds out of the gear you have. There's also going to be stuff coming up. There's the weekly podcast where we talk about music tech news and everything that's going on, and there's so much more. So stick around for all of that. And thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon, because it really helps us to do more videos like this. Give us a like on the button below. Click the like button. That's really appreciated if you haven't already. And stick around for that. Stick around for the next set of videos. I'm Adam Steele for Hot Pause Studios, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.